6 months had passed since Una Park had first held 3 terrified Viraki cubs in her bleeding arms. They were no longer cubs. They were adolescents now, nearly 2 meters tall, with muscles like coiled steel under their shimmering blue scales. Their claws could tear through reinforced bulkheads. Their jaws could crush metal. And they still called her Mama. Life on Harmony 7 had settled into a new kind of normal. The other species had grown used to seeing Una walk through the corridors with 3 predators at her heels. Some still feared them. Many still crossed to the other side of hallways when they approached, but open panic had faded. The cubs had not hurt anyone. They had learned to be gentle. They had learned to be patient. Then disaster struck. It happened without warning. Deep in the station's engineering section, a containment unit failed. Radioactive coolant, a deadly poison that glowed sickly green, began to leak into the ventilation system. Emergency alarms screamed through every corridor. Automated systems sealed blast doors throughout the station, trapping people wherever they stood. Una was in the agricultural bay with her children when the lockdown happened. Heavy doors slammed shut around them. Warning lights flashed red. A calm voice announced over the speakers that this was not a drill, that everyone should remain where they were, that rescue teams were being dispatched. Una pulled out her communicator. Her hands were shaking. "Station control, this is Park. What is happening?" The voice that answered was strained with fear. "Reactor coolant breach. Multiple sections contaminated. We have casualties." Una's heart went cold. "Which sections?" "Sections 5 through 8 are flooded with radiation. Section 7 has 17 researchers trapped. The emergency door is jammed. We cannot reach them." "Who is in Section 7? There was a pause. Then, "Dr. Lee is among the trapped personnel. Sujin, her best friend. The woman who brought treats for the cubs and helped Una with medical checkups. The woman who had trusted her when no one else would." Una switched channels, trying to reach Sujin directly. Static crackled. Then a voice broke through, weak but recognizable. "Una? Is that you? Sujin, are you okay? Are you hurt?" "Not yet." Sujin's voice was tight with controlled fear. "But the radiation levels are rising. The rescue team cannot reach us. The corridor between Section 5 and Section 7 is completely flooded with coolant. Anyone who enters will die in minutes. Una, I do not think we are getting out of here." Una closed her eyes. Her mind raced. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. She looked at her children. Momi, Duri, and Handel looked back at her. They could sense her fear. Their scales rippled with agitation. Low sounds came from their throats, sounds of concern. Una remembered something Jinwoo had told her months ago. The Viraki home world orbited an unstable star. Their entire species had evolved to survive high levels of radiation. Their scales absorbed it. Their bodies processed it like humans processed oxygen. "Babies," Una said slowly. "Mama needs your help." She explained the situation as simply as she could. People were trapped. People would die. The path to reach them was poisonous to most species. But not to Viraki, not to them. The cubs understood. Maybe not every word, but they understood the important parts. Mama needed them. Others needed them. It was time to prove they were not the monsters everyone thought they were. Una found an emergency radiation suit in a storage locker. It was rated for 15 minutes of exposure. She would need at least 20 to reach Section 7. It was not enough. It would have to be enough. She overrode the agricultural bay's emergency seal. Warning messages flashed on every screen. She was violating 17 station protocols. She could be arrested. She could be expelled from the station. She did not care. The door opened. The corridor beyond glowed with poisonous green light. Una stepped forward. Her children moved with her, flanking her on all sides. Their bodies blocked some of the radiation. Their scales seemed to drink it in, protecting their small human mother as best they could. They walked into death. The radiation hit Yuna like a physical force. Even through her suit, she could feel it pressing against her skin. Her sensors screamed warnings. 15 minutes of exposure maximum. She was already at minute 3. They moved as fast as they could. The corridors were empty. Everyone else had fled or was trapped. Only Yuna and her children moved through the poisoned halls. At minute 12, Yuna stumbled. The radiation was winning. Her body was failing. Her vision blurred. Her legs felt like they were filled with sand. She fell. Strong arms caught her. Haniel, the largest of her children, lifted her as gently as a human mother lifting a sleeping baby. The predator cradled the human against its chest and began to run. Yuna drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard alarms. She heard her children's feet pounding against metal floors. She heard their worried growls. Then she heard a crash. The jammed door of Section 7 had been reinforced steel, designed to withstand explosive decompression. It was not designed to withstand 3 Viraki adolescents who loved their mother. Bomi, Dory, and Haniel hit the door together. They did not attack it like wild animals. They worked together, coordinated, striking the weak points they had learned to identify from watching human engineers. Jinwoo had been right. Viraki bonded through hunting together. But Yuna had taught them that hunting did not mean killing. Hunting meant working together to solve problems. The door crumpled inward. 17 researchers stared in horror as 3 massive predators crashed through the ruined doorway. But the predators did not attack. Instead, they gently placed an unconscious human woman on the floor. Yuri stepped forward. His mouth opened. Sound came out, harsh and strange, but recognizable. She says, "Go." The Viraki was speaking. Speaking in standard, the common language of the galaxy. Mama says, "We keep safe." They were the first words any of them had spoken in the language of prey species. Words learned not from instinct or hunting, but from love. The evacuation took 11 minutes. The cubs carried those who could not walk. They shielded the group from radiation pockets. They growled warnings when structural elements became unstable. Every single researcher survived. Yuna spent 4 days in the medical bay. Radiation sickness had nearly killed her. Doctors said she was lucky to be alive. They said another 5 minutes of exposure would have been fatal. Her children refused to leave her door. They slept in a pile against the entrance, growling at anyone who approached with anything other than medical equipment. They ate nothing. They drank only when Sujin brought them water and promised that Mama was getting better. When Yuna finally emerged from the medical bay, pale and weak but alive, she found the entire population of the station waiting in the corridor. Species who had run from her children for months now stood voluntarily in their presence. Species who had voted to destroy the cubs now looked at them with something new in their eyes. Not fear. Respect. Commander Telex approached. The Fenari performed a gesture that Yuna had never seen before, a complex movement of all 4 arms that indicated the deepest possible respect. "Ms. Park," the commander said, "we owe you and your children more than we can ever repay." Yuna smiled weakly. She reached out and touched Haniel's snout. The massive predator leaned into her hand, purring softly. "They are good children," Yuna said. "They just needed someone to believe in them." From that day forward, no one on Harmony 7 called the Viraki monsters. They called them heroes, and they called Yuna Park something else entirely. They called her Mama Viraki, the human who had raised predators with love, the woman who had walked through death to save her friend, the mother who had taught monsters to be gentle. She wore the title proudly. 5 years had passed since Yuna Park had first faced a Viraki matriarch and changed the course of galactic history. 5 years of teaching. 5 years of growth. 5 years that transformed the most feared species in the known universe. They called it the Viraki Reformation. It began with 3 cubs and a human farmer on a small space station. It grew into something that historians would study for centuries. Unipark established the first cross-species Viraki education center on a neutral world called Haven. Young Viraki came from all corners of the empire to learn from the human who had raised predators with love. She taught them what she had taught her own children. That strength without purpose was meaningless. That protection was nobler than destruction. That bonds of care created stronger loyalty than bonds of fear. She taught them to read and write and think. She taught them that being powerful did not mean they had to be cruel. Not everyone was happy about these changes. Many Viraki clung to the old ways. They called Yuna's teachings corruption. They said she had brainwashed their youth. They said she had turned hunters into weaklings. Some of them tried to stop her. Assassination attempts came. Yuna lost count of how many times someone tried to kill her. But every attempt failed. Every single one. Because her children never left her side. Bomi, Duri, and Haniel had grown into full adults. They towered over their human mother, each standing 3 meters tall, their scales now a deep royal blue that marked them as something special among Viraki. They were the first of what became known as the honored hunters. Viraki, who followed the old ways of protection and purpose. They shielded Yuna from every threat. They got blades meant for her heart. They stopped assassins before they could strike. They became legends in their own right, but they also became something more. Bomi, the smallest of the 3, led the first Viraki humanitarian mission. When a world called Thren was devastated by massive storms, it was Viraki ships that brought aid, not invasion fleets. Aid ships. Bomi personally carried survivors from the wreckage, her massive claws gentle as she lifted frightened children to safety. The images spread across the galaxy. For the first time in history, people saw Viraki as saviors instead of destroyers. Duri, once the most aggressive of the cubs, became a teacher. He worked with troubled Viraki youth who had known nothing but violence. He understood them because he had been them. He had been angry and scared and dangerous, and he had learned another way. He showed them that same path, patient and steady, never giving up on even the most difficult students. Haniel, the largest and most diplomatic, became the first Viraki representative to the Galactic Council. She stood before leaders of 100 species, many of whom had lost worlds to Viraki conquest, and she apologized. Not weakness, acknowledgement. She promised that the Viraki were changing. She promised that her people would become protectors instead of predators. Many did not believe her at first, but as the years passed and the changes continued, belief grew. The old matriarch Voran became Yuna's strongest supporter. The ancient Viraki leader publicly declared that Unipark had given their species a gift more valuable than any conquest. She had given them back their honor. When Yuna turned 60, she received something no human had ever received before. The Viraki gave her a title in their ancient tongue. The words translated roughly to Mother of the New Way. It was the highest honor their species could give to an outsider. Yuna accepted the honor with tears in her eyes and her 3 children standing proudly behind her. The final test came when Yuna was 73 years old. A faction of traditional Viraki, those who hated everything she represented, launched a direct attack on the education center. 100 warriors came, armed with the deadliest weapons their species had ever created. They came to destroy Yuna's legacy once and for all. They expected to find a week-old human and a handful of students. Instead, they found an army. Not just Momi, Duri, and Haniel. Dozens of their students stood ready. Young Viraki who had learned Yuna's teachings. Young Viraki who had discovered there was another way to be strong. Young Viraki who were ready to protect rather than destroy. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Not a single death occurred on either side. The attackers were subdued and disarmed with precise, careful force. No killing blows, no unnecessary injuries. Just enough strength to end the fight without ending lives. When it was over, Yuna walked among the defeated attackers. She was old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were still kind. Her voice was still warm. "You came here to destroy," she said to them. "But I do not want to destroy you. I want to offer you the same thing I offered my children. I want to offer you another way." Most of them stayed to learn. The years passed. Yuna's hair turned from white to silver. Her steps grew slower, but she never stopped teaching. She never stopped loving. She watched her children become leaders of a reformed species. She watched her grandchildren, young Viraki, who called her grandmother Yuna, grow up in a galaxy that no longer feared their kind. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92. The funeral was the largest the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from every known species came to pay respects. Humans stood beside creatures they had once feared. Prey species stood beside former predators. Enemies stood beside enemies, united in grief for one small woman who had changed everything. But the most striking mourners were the Viraki. Thousands of them came. Great warriors with scales of every color, their 6 eyes wet with tears their ancestors had never learned to shed. They had learned to cry from Yuna. They had learned to love from Yuna. They had learned to be gentle from a woman who had never been afraid of them. Bomi, Duri, and Haniel stood at the front. They were elders now, their scales touched with the silver of age. But they still stood tall and proud. They were living proof of what their mother had taught. Bomi spoke first, her voice carrying across the vast crowd. She saw monsters and found children. Duri spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. She faced fear and offered love. Haniel spoke last, tears streaming down her scaled face. She was human, and she taught us what that meant. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Viraki began to speak. Each one said the same word over and over, a word they had learned from Yuna, a word that had changed their entire civilization. Mama. The sound of it filled the air like thunder. Thousands of voices, predator voices, speaking a word of love. Mama, Mama. The galaxy remembered Yuna Park not as a warrior, not as a conqueror, not as a leader of armies. They remembered her as a mother. The mother of 3 cubs. The mother of a reformed species. The mother who had loved monsters until they forgot how to be monstrous. And the Viraki, the most feared predators in existence, remembered her as the greatest hunter of all. The one who hunted hearts and never missed. In the years that followed, statues of Yuna Park were built on 100 worlds. Schools were named after her. Children of all species learned about the human woman who had changed everything with nothing but kindness and love. But the most important legacy was not made of stone or words. It was made of living Viraki who remembered her teachings, who protected instead of destroyed, who loved instead of feared, who proved every single day that monsters were just creatures no one had loved enough. That was Yuna's gift to the galaxy. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not weapons, not technology, not conquest, just a simple, stubborn, magnificent capacity to love things that terrified everyone else. And in the end, that was enough to change everything. The space station Harmony 7 floated in the cold darkness between stars. It was home to scientists and workers from 12 different alien species. They studied planets, stars, and the mysteries of the universe. Life on the station was quiet and peaceful. That peace ended on a cold morning when the salvage team brought something back from the wreckage of a destroyed warship. 3 Viraki cubs, barely 1 month old. The Viraki were the most feared creatures in the entire galaxy. Adults stood 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in black scales harder than steel. They had 6 limbs, each ending in claws that could cut through metal like paper. Their jaws held rows of teeth shaped like curved knives. They had 6 eyes that could see in complete darkness. They were born to hunt. They were born to kill. Even as infants, these 3 cubs were dangerous. They were the size of large dogs, but they had the strength to break bones with a single swipe. Their instincts told them to attack anything that moved. Anything that breathed was food to them. Station Commander Telex called an emergency meeting. Telex was a Phanari, a species with see-through skin and 4 thin arms. The Phanari were diplomats and peacemakers. They did not like violence. Telex especially did not like having 3 baby-killing machines on the station. The meeting room was full of frightened aliens. The Molokan representative, a creature that looked like a walking jellyfish, spoke first. "We must destroy them immediately. They are too dangerous to keep alive." The Grellish scientist, a tall being with gray skin and large black eyes, shook its head. "We cannot kill infants, but we can freeze them. Put them in cold sleep until we can return them to Viraki space. The journey takes 18 months. 18 months with those things on my station?" Telex's 4 arms waved in distress. "The herbivore species are already panicking. 3 of my crew members fainted just seeing the cubs in their cage." The aliens argued back and forth. No one wanted the cubs. Every species in the room had lost something to the Viraki. Lost plants. Lost people. Lost everything. The Viraki were conquerors. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who tried to stop them. In the corner of the room sat a small human woman. Her name was Una Park. She was the station's agricultural specialist. She grew food in the station's gardens. She was quiet and gentle. Her hands were soft from working with soil and plants. She was 165 centimeters tall, small even for a human. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. Una listened to the arguing. She thought about the 3 cubs alone in a cage somewhere on the station, scared, hungry, orphaned. Their parents were dead, killed in the battle that destroyed their ship. They had no one. Una stood up. The room went quiet. Humans were strange to most alien species. They were not the strongest or the fastest. They were not the smartest or the longest lived. But there was something about humans that made other species pay attention when they spoke. "I will take them," Una said. The silence stretched. Then Telex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Miss Park, with respect, you do not understand. These are Viraki cubs. They will kill you. Perhaps not today. Perhaps not tomorrow. But within a week, they will tear you apart." "I raised my younger brothers and sisters," Una replied calmly. "I have handled difficult children before. These are not children." The Molokan representative shouted. "They are monsters." Una looked at the jellyfish-like alien with steady eyes. "All babies are difficult. All babies bite and scratch and cry. These ones just have sharper claws." She turned to Commander Telex. "Let me try. What do you have to lose? If they kill me, you can freeze them like you planned. But maybe, just maybe, they need something none of you have thought to give them. And what is that?" Telex asked. "Kindness," Una said simply. The council agreed to let her try. They thought she was crazy. They thought she would be dead before the week was over. They made her sign papers saying the station was not responsible for her death. They put sensors on her that would check her life signs every 30 seconds. If she died, security teams would come immediately to contain the cubs. Una walked to the holding area where the cubs were kept. They were in a cage made of reinforced steel. The walls were scratched and dented from their attempts to escape. The cubs themselves were huddled in a corner, hissing and growling. Their scales were dull. Their 6 eyes were wild with fear. They were terrified. Yuna opened the cage door. The security officer behind her made a choking sound. "Ma'am, please, at least wear protective gear." "They can smell fear," Yuna said. "They can smell dishonesty. If I go in there wearing armor, they will know I am afraid of them. They need to know I am not a threat." She stepped into the cage with nothing but her bare hands. The cubs attacked immediately. They launched themselves at her, claws extended, tiny jaws snapping. Yuna did not run. She did not scream. She simply knelt down and let them come. They scratched her arms. They bit her hands. Blood ran down her fingers. But Yuna just smiled through the pain and began to hum. It was an old song, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her when she was small. The melody was soft and gentle, rising and falling like waves on a quiet beach. The cubs stopped attacking. They tilted their heads, confused. No prey had ever done this before. Prey ran. Prey screamed. Prey fought back. This creature did none of those things. It just sat there, bleeding and humming. Yuna slowly reached out and touched the nearest cub. It flinched but did not bite. She stroked its scales gently, still humming. The cub made a strange sound, something between a growl and a purr. One by one, the cubs stopped hissing. One by one, they crept closer. Yuna wrapped them in heated blankets she had brought. She fed them nutrient paste with her bare, bleeding fingers. She did not flinch when their teeth scraped her skin. She just kept humming, kept feeding, kept touching them with gentle hands. By the time morning came, Yuna was exhausted. Her arms were covered in scratches and bite marks. But she was smiling. The 3 cubs were sleeping in a pile on her chest. Their scales rose and fell with each breath. A deep, rumbling purr vibrated through their bodies and into hers. The security officer stared through the cage bars in disbelief. "How?" he whispered. Yuna looked down at the sleeping predators. "They were not monsters," she said softly. "They were just babies who needed someone to love them." She named them that morning. Bomi for the smallest, because the name meant something beautiful in her language. Dori for the most aggressive, because it meant strong. And Haniel for the largest, because it meant sky. And when she looked into its eyes, she saw endless possibility. The station thought she would be dead in a week. Instead, she had become a mother. 1 year had passed since 3 orphan Viraki cubs had arrived on Harmony 7. 1 year since Yuna Park had taken them into her care. 1 year of growth, of learning, of love. Then the warship appeared. It came out of hyperspace without warning. A massive vessel of black metal and sharp angles. It was a Viraki dreadnought, a ship designed for conquest and destruction. Its weapons could reduce the entire station to dust in seconds. "Commander." Telex's blood ran cold when the communication came through. The face on the screen was terrifying, a Viraki female even larger than the males, with scales of deep purple and 6 eyes that glowed with ancient intelligence. A matriarch. One of the ruling females who commanded the Viraki fleets. "I am Matriarch Varan," the creature said. Her voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. "You have something that belongs to my species. 3 hatchlings, stolen from the wreckage of our vessel 1 year ago. You will return them immediately." Telex tried to keep calm. "Matriarch, the hatchlings were not stolen. They were rescued. They were alone and dying. We saved them. Irrelevant." The matriarch's eyes narrowed. "They are Viraki. They will be returned to fulfill their purpose. They will be trained as warriors. They will serve the Empire as all Viraki must serve. You have 1 cycle to comply. If you refuse, we will take them by force. And we will destroy your station as punishment for your theft." The communication ended. Telex immediately called an emergency council. The station had no defenses that could stop a Varaki warship. They had no allies nearby who could help. They had one day to hand over the cubs, or everyone on the station would die. Yun, I heard the news in her quarters. She was helping Haniel practice reading standard script. The children were intelligent, far more intelligent than anyone had expected. They had learned to speak. They had learned to read. They were learning mathematics and science and history. When she heard what the matriarch wanted, Yuna felt her heart break. Bomi, Duri, and Haniel sensed her pain immediately. They pressed close to her, making soft sounds of concern. They did not fully understand what was happening, but they understood that their mother was scared. I will not let them take you, Yuna whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was an empty promise. What could one human do against a Varaki matriarch? What could she possibly say or do to change anything? Taiho Choi, the communications officer, came to her quarters that evening. He had an idea. A crazy, impossible idea. Let me speak to the matriarch, Yuna said. Telex refused at first. Varaki did not negotiate with other species. They certainly did not negotiate with humans. But Taiho argued on Yuna's behalf. Everything about this situation is impossible, Taiho said. Varaki cubs bonding with a human is impossible. Varaki adolescents speaking standard is impossible. Maybe the rules are changing. Maybe we need to try something new. The council debated for hours. In the end, they agreed. They had no other options. If Yuna wanted to speak to the matriarch, they would let her. They did not expect it to work, but they had nothing left to lose. The communication was established. Yuna sat before the screen in the command center, her 3 children arranged behind her. They stood tall and proud, their blue scales gleaming. They were no longer the frightened, angry cub she had first held in her arms. They were young Varaki on the edge of adulthood. The matriarch's face appeared on screen. Her 6 eyes immediately fixed on Yuna with predatory intensity. You are the creature who stole our young, Matriarch Varan said. Yuna met those ancient eyes without flinching. I am the woman who raised them when no one else would. When they were abandoned in the wreckage of a battle your people started. When every other species wanted them dead or frozen. I fed them. I taught them. I loved them. Love. The matriarch spoke the word like it was something disgusting. A prey concept. It makes weakness. It makes softness. You have ruined these hatchlings. They should have been raised as warriors. Instead, you have turned them into pets. Have I? Yuna glanced back at her children. Bomi, Duri, Haniel, show her what you have learned. The 3 Varaki stepped forward. They did not crouch in submission like young Varaki were supposed to do before a matriarch. They stood tall and proud. And then they spoke. Their voices were deep and powerful, speaking in the ancient language of the Varaki. Yuna did not understand the words, but she had helped them practice. She had helped them find recordings of old Varaki ceremonies. She had helped them discover something that their own species had forgotten. I am Bomi, the smallest said. Daughter of Yuna. I have learned to protect without destroying. I am Dori, the middle child continued. Son of Yuna. I have learned that strength serves best when it shields the weak. I am Haniel, the largest finished. Daughter of Yuna. I have learned that the greatest hunters pursue not death, but purpose. Silence fell over the communication channel. The matriarch's scales shifted through colors that Yuna could not interpret. Her 6 eyes blinked slowly, one pair at a time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost reverent. They speak the old words, Matriarch Varan said. The teachings of the first hunters. These teachings come from the beginning of our civilization, from before we became conquerors. We thought these words were lost forever. We thought the old ways had been forgotten. Yuna took a deep breath. I did not know they were Viraki teachings. My children learned them from human philosophy, from the idea that true strength is not measured by what you can destroy. True strength is measured by what you can protect. The matriarch stared at Yuna for a long moment. Then something remarkable happened. The massive predator lowered her head. It was not submission, not exactly. It was acknowledgement, respect. You have done something no Viraki has accomplished in 10 generations, Matriarch Varan said slowly. You have raised hunters of honor. You have reminded us of what we once were, before we lost our way. The warship's weapons powered down. The threat faded. I will not take your children from you, human, the matriarch continued. But I have a request. A plea, if you understand such things. What request? Yuna asked. Teach others, the matriarch said. Teach other Viraki what you have taught these three. Show us the path back to what we were meant to be. Help us remember how to be hunters of honor instead of hunters of blood. Yuna looked at her children. Thomi, Dori, and Haniel looked back at her with love and trust in their 6 eyes. They had been born to be weapons. They had been raised to be protectors. Now they would help her change an entire civilization. Yes, Yuna said. I will teach. But I have conditions. The matriarch's eyes widened slightly. No one made conditions with a Viraki matriarch. No one dared. Speak your conditions, Varan said. The teaching must be by choice, not force, Yuna said. I will not be a prisoner or a slave. I will teach those who want to learn. And my children stay with me, always. The matriarch considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded, a gesture she had learned from watching humans through the communication screen. Agreed. You have my word as matriarch. You and your children will be honored guests, not prisoners. And those who learn from you will do so by choice. The communication ended. The warship withdrew from the station's perimeter. But before it vanished into hyperspace, it sent one final message. The Viraki will remember the name Yuna Park. The Viraki will remember the human who raised predators with love. In the command center, Yuna sank back in her chair. She was shaking. She had just negotiated with a Viraki matriarch. She had just agreed to help reform an entire species of galactic conquerors. Her children gathered around her, pressing close, offering comfort and warmth. What happens now, Mama? Haniel asked in standard. Yuna smiled through her tears. Now, my babies, we change the galaxy. 3 months passed on Harmony 7. The station continued its slow orbit around the dying star. Scientists did their work. Engineers fixed broken machines. Life went on as normal. But nothing was truly normal anymore. Not since Yuna Park had adopted 3 Viraki cubs. The cubs had grown. They had grown a lot. Boni, Duri, and Haniel now stood at Yuna's hip. They weighed more than she did. Their scales had changed from infant black to a deep, beautiful blue that shimmered when light hit them just right. Their claws had grown long and sharp enough to cut through the station's steel walls. Their teeth had fully developed into rows of curved blades. They were no longer helpless babies. They were becoming predators, and yet, wherever Yuna walked, they followed. They padded behind her through the station's corridors like silent shadows. Their 6 eyes watched everything, tracking every movement, noting every potential threat. They walked in perfect formation, one on each side and one behind, always keeping their human mother in the center, where she was safest. The other species on the station were terrified. When Yuna walked through the cafeteria, aliens scrambled to get out of her way. When she visited the medical bay for her regular checkups, the waiting room emptied in seconds. No one wanted to be near the Viraki. No one dared to get close. Yuna noticed this, of course. She noticed how her friends stopped inviting her to social gatherings. She noticed how conversations went quiet when she approached. She noticed the fear in everyone's eyes, but she also noticed how her children behaved. They never attacked anyone. They never even threatened anyone. They simply watched and waited, always looking to Yuna for guidance. Jinwoo Kang was the first person brave enough to study them up close. Jinwoo was the station's xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. He was also human, which meant he understood Yuna in ways the other species could not. "You are doing something impossible," Jinwoo told her one day. He was sitting in Yuna's quarters, watching as she carefully oiled Bomi's scales. The cubs needed regular grooming to keep their scales healthy. The scientific literature says Veraki cubs only bond through violence, through dominance displays and hunting together, through fighting each other to establish who is strongest. Yuna dipped her cloth in the special oil and continued her work. Bomi purred under her touch, eyes half closed in contentment. "I do not know what the literature says. I only know what works. But how does it work?" Jinwoo leaned forward, genuinely curious. "How did you do this?" Yuna thought about the question. Behind her, Duri was playing with a toy she had made, a ball of woven fabric that squeaked when squeezed. Haniel was curled up near the heating vent, watching everything with calm, intelligent eyes. "Humans bond differently," Yuna finally said. "We bond through care, through feeding, through touch and warmth and safety. I did not treat them like dangerous animals. I treated them like my children. I fed them when they were hungry. I kept them warm when they were cold. I held them when they were scared. I was patient when they were difficult." "That sounds like basic parenting," Jinwoo said. Yuna smiled. "It is. That is all it is. The Veraki are feared because they are powerful. But power does not mean they do not need love. Every living thing needs love, Jinwoo. Even monsters." The word made her frown. She did not like it when people called her children monsters. A crash interrupted them. Duri had broken his toy. The aggressive cub looked at the torn fabric in his claws, then looked at Yuna with something very close to shame. "It is okay, Duri," Yuna said gently. "I will make you another one. But remember, we must be gentle with our things." Duri lowered his massive head. A sound came from his throat, low and soft. It almost sounded like he was saying sorry. Jinwoo stared in amazement. Did he just apologize? "He is learning," Yuna said proudly. "They're all learning." The true test came 2 weeks later. Yuna was walking through the corridor near the science labs when she turned a corner and bumped into a Grellish researcher. The tall gray alien stumbled backward in surprise, arms flailing. The cubs reacted instantly. All three of them moved between Yuna and the perceived threat. Their scales flared outward, making them look even bigger. Low growls built in their chests. Their claws extended, ready for battle. The Grellish researcher froze. His large black eyes went wide with terror. He was certain he was about to die. But the cubs did not attack. They waited. They watched. They looked at Yuna. "It is okay, babies," Yuna said calmly. She patted Haniel on the shoulder. "It was just an accident. This one is a friend. Friend." The words seemed to register. The cubs' scales slowly flattened. Their growls faded. They stepped back, returning to their positions behind and beside Yuna. The Grellish researcher stood frozen for another long moment. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed against the wall, shaking violently. Medical teams came to help him. He had not been hurt, not physically, but he would need treatment for shock. Word of the incident spread through the station like fire. The predator cubs had threatened someone but had not attacked. They had waited for Yuna's command. They had listened to her. This should not have been possible. Dr. Jinwoo Kang wrote a detailed report about what he had observed. He sent copies to every xenobiology institution in the known galaxy. The scientific community was stunned. The Viraki had been studied for centuries. They were considered pure predators, driven only by instinct and hunger. They did not form bonds outside their own species. They did not take commands from anyone they considered prey. But Una Park, a simple human gardener, had achieved the impossible. She had earned the loyalty of apex predators, not through strength or dominance, but through love. Other humans on the station began to visit Una more often. Sujin Lee, the medical officer, brought treats for the cubs. Taiho Choi, the communications officer, read them stories through the intercom. Slowly, carefully, other humans began to treat the cubs like the children Una claimed they were. The cubs responded to this kindness. They learned to be gentle. They learned to play without breaking things. They learned to recognize friends from threats. Most importantly, they learned that the galaxy was not just full of prey to be hunted. It was full of beings who could be trusted. One evening, Una sat with all 3 cubs in her quarters. They were too big to sleep on her chest now, but they still curled up as close to her as they could get. Their purring vibrated through the floor. "My beautiful children," Una whispered, stroking each of their heads in turn. "You are going to change everything. You do not know it yet, but you will show the galaxy what Viraki can become. You will show them that monsters are just creatures no one loved enough." The cubs did not understand her words. Not fully. But they understood her tone. They understood her warmth. They understood that they were safe, that they were home, that they were loved. And in that moment, 3 apex predators who had been born for war were at perfect peace.